product marketing manager. Who loves marketing people? Yay! So actually, I'm actually a software developer. Recently turned marketing manager because I found NativeScript and thought it was super cool. And at the time, no one had heard of it, and that wasn't going to stand. So, who wants to see PowerPoints? Yeah. Who would rather me build an app? Who thinks a marketing guy can build an app? Who's not going to raise their hand no matter what I say? Very good. Okay, so firstly, I'll just give you the quick pitch of NativeScript. NativeScript is the way to write truly native mobile apps with JavaScript, TypeScript, or Angular. So if you've heard of React Native and like it but don't really want to use React, basically that's what you need us for. We have freedom in architecture. For example, right here I have the code on the screen, and then here's my emulator. Let's see if this will make a good noise for us. Pretty. Isn't that amazing? And that's a mobile app running in an emulator, but it's basically Angular 2 code. If you looked at the source code of this entire application, it'll look exactly like you'd expect. You can basically share the same code, except the view layer is different. You see these lines here, lines 23 through lines 29. That's our views. It's different than HTML. NativeScript does not run in a web view. It uses native UI. So these are abstractions. So if you use our cross-platform abstractions, we'll actually call the native UI on your deploy target. So on iOS, it'll be native UI. On Android, it'll be native UI. So you get no compromises. You get all the performance that you want, and you still get to use JavaScript, TypeScript, or Angular. So let's build an app. So we are going to do this, I promise. All right, so TNS create, which is Telerik NativeScript create. We're going to call this, what are we going to do first? Beers. Beer 1. Okay, so it's going to sacrifice a chicken, sprinkle some pixie dust, and just do random things that it needs to do to create a new application. When I first got into mobile development, I come from a web development background, did it for 16, 17 years. I could not really get past how long it took to start an emulator. Anyone have that experience? It does not refresh a web page. But there's some great things in here that's no longer an issue. So let's just say cd beers 1, and now I'm in my application. I'm going to run this application with this fancy tool called LiveSync. Try to guess what that does. Android, because I'm going to use an Android emulator, and I want it to watch because let's only run this command once. If I pull up the emulator now, you'll notice eventually it'll change. It takes about a minute, and what it's doing right now is bundling all the files that it needs, downloading things from NPM, sticking them all together. If there's any compilation that needs to happen, it's doing that. If you develop with NPM now, most of these console messages are probably something you've seen before. And then eventually it's going to push an APK. So while that's happening, I'm going to open up this editor here. And anyone use VS Code? Yep, okay, great. So first people that ask me NativeScript, how much does it cost? And I would say NativeScript is free. But we have this great editor. How much does the editor cost? It's free. All right, so how do you make money? We don't. So if you don't like that, write your name on a $100 bill and pass it on over. We do appreciate it. That would be nice for the people. And so here's my application. Let's just take a quick look through here. All my code is going to be in the app directory. All the NativeScript stuff is going to be in node modules. And things that are platform specific are in platform. So let's look at the code we're going to manage. And I'm using non-Angular 2 architecture. I don't want to go on record as saying Angular 2 still confuses me, but I'm going to claim marketing manager here. I'm taking a class in it, but it's not what I do every day anymore. Let's see how our emulator's doing. Okay, we're almost there. And so one thing you'll notice is in this Hello World app, it looks a lot like JavaScript because it's JavaScript. And our view layer, once again, is just subtly different. It's cross-platform abstractions. It's super quick to learn. We actually support Flexbox. Any Flexbox users? We have that kind of support as well. So it's basically what we did with NativeScript is we wanted a web developer to feel comfortable using the skills they already have, but build an application that didn't compromise. And so if you work at a place where you have to do web and mobile, or trying to do native mobile is really hard because you've got iOS and Android are very, very different from a platform perspective, but the web can kind of tie it all together. And so that's what we're basically doing here. We style with CSS, which is great. So everyone loves CSS. One of our competitors is Xamarin, and they are constantly asked to implement CSS, and they can't do it. So go us. And we have an app. So here's a Hello World app for NativeScript. There's some good comments in there. And so if you download this, there's an easy way to get going and figure stuff out. But basically what this is a tap counter. It's not all the way awesome. So what we're going to do is turn this into a beer directory, because that's a tiny bit more awesome than a tap counter. So I have some code that I've prepared before somewhere. And we're basically going to copy paste, because like I said, bad typist. But I will explain everything that I do once I paste it in. So this goes in our main.xml, which is a view layer. And I'm going to stick this right here. And save it. Now, behind the scenes, it's probably already synced up, but what we have here is a stack layout. Think of this like cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this happens to be vertical. You could go horizontal if that's the kind of thing you're into. Here's a button. Remember this line of code. We're going to talk about it in depth in a minute, this button. Then, basically, that's a button. You can push it. It responds to tap events. Here you go. This refers to the function that's called. And then I have a list view, which is basically a list of things. And a list view has a row, and here's how I describe my row. Does all that kind of make sense? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward when you look at it, right? So let's see if this actually does anything. Yay, that's great. So in the console, you can see that it synced everything, and it's all wonderful. I push this button, nothing happens. So let's move to the second bit of code. And now we're going to pull an API, and my rule of thumb is never use the network when you're demoing code. So what are we going to do? Use the network, everyone. Cross your fingers. Okay, so look, it's just JavaScript, right? HTTP call, there's some JSON stuff, some console logs. You wrote those 100 times. It's probably already synced up. Pull up the console so we can see if anything changes, and boom. Whoa, that is just terrible. Would you like to try to figure that API out? It's a bit of a disaster, isn't it? So what if I had a debugger and an introspector and a conditional breakpoint setter for the low price of? Free. Well, we just happen to have that. So let's kick that off, because it's pretty cool. To me, this is the best thing about this IDE, is the ability to know what you're actually looking at. So I'm going to start this. It's going to sync on Android, because that's what we're doing. And it'll take a minute to get itself hydrated here. Meanwhile, let's put some more code in. So the next thing I'm going to do is, this is the same code we just looked at, but it's a tiny bit more advanced. When I paste it in, you'll get the code coloring, and we'll talk through what the differences are. So that's going to be here. Go down a little bit, buddy. You can do it. All right. Put my breakpoint back in. And what we have here is, it's the same code. Like I say, we're pulling this API, we're getting JSON back, and all I'm doing is stepping over it and making a struct or an object, populating it, and then shoving it into an array. So no rocket science. Everyone comfortable with that? I get accused of throwing in some magic every once in a while. Let's see. Pardon? It might have died. Let's put another one. They're supposed to be red, so this is kind of disturbing, but hey, let's push the button and see what happens. It's a demo, right? Okay. Yay, and the debugger works great. It really does, but it's supposed to have a red dot right there. If there's something I'm forgetting, please remind me, folks. Save the file. Let's see, did I save the file? Did not save the file. Give that man a prize. You get a free NativeScript sticker. Comes in many sizes. Save. All right, so pretend that there's a debugger that works, because there is. I promise you, it's so great. And it'll basically let you step through all your calls. You can pull up any variables, conditional breakpoints. Clearly, marketing guy, right? Let's go back to the code. If I push the button, what actually happens? Well, in the console, what I've done is I've organized this into an array, and it's pulled back, and now I want to display it. So I'm going to change the display code just a tiny bit by changing the item template. Remember, the item template is basically the row here. Go away, debugger. You've just not done your job today, have you? Main page. All right, so we're going to replace this. Now what we have is just a bit more of an advanced view here. So I've got this image. I'm expecting this to come back from my my array. And the array is called beer list, and all that is bound. You can see that there. And then I'm going to put another stack layout. There's going to be a name and a description. And if I save the file, let's see what we've got. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is a way to reuse web code and fonts and animation. So let's create a new application. If I have time, I'll come back and fix this. I'm sure it's something I'm overlooking. Let's create. Now, once again, it'll create a new app and populate everything. We'll change into that application. And then move into our VS Code editor. Okay, so what happened was, this is what you miss when you skip through all the commercials. So I pulled in 2 plugins. They came out from NPM, and I put them in here. One's called Twitter Bang. One's called Explosion Field. And what's interesting is how these are constructed. So let's pull this up. Here's the one that runs on Android. And you can see all this code. It looks a bit like gobbledygook. The important part is this line right here. Basically what's going on is there's a Java jar, and that's the path on the right-hand side that points to the Java jar that I pulled into the system. On the left side, that's the name that I've given it in JavaScript as a variable. So I can directly talk to this jar and do all sorts of things that like attach to window or run any kind of operations that I want on it, set colors, and then it operates because I can do that. Now, that's not just something that's available in plugins. We're going to go into the NativeScript core while we're waiting on this app to load, and I'll show you that button that we talked about before. So UI button is our cross-platform abstraction. Here's the Android version. And if you look on line 26 here, can everyone see that? The left side of that equal sign is JavaScript, and the right side is Java code. So it's a little weird when people see this. They don't think it's possible. I didn't think it was either. I didn't think you could get away with this on the mobile platforms, but you can. So what this means is with JavaScript, you can directly access every single native platform API without us having to do anything. We write no binding code. We make no features available. If it's there, you can operate with it. So let's see what happened. Here's Twitter Bang. Now, the code that I personally wrote, I will do this one time. See the animation now. This time when I do it, notice how smooth it is over my display on VGA and in an emulator. If anyone's ever worked with an emulator, this is a big deal. Ready? Isn't that great? These are fonts, so let's look at what those are. And then I'll show you the code that I wrote to make all this happen, and then we'll move on and see if we can get the beers one working. So all this is the XML stuff we talked about before. This is the character code for some wingding thing that Font Awesome knows about. And then all I did here was classify certain CSS classes so it knows what to do. And that's in the CSS file. Once again, no real rocket science here. It's just colors and some alignments. And then lastly, there's a boom function in the appropriately named mainpage.js. And all that basically does is call these packages, the Twitter Bang and the Explosion Field that we pulled in. So it's a very minimal amount of code to run great animations and use fonts from WebAwesome, use JavaScript, and do things that you just can't do with Hybrid or on the web. Does that kind of make sense? Do you guys forgive me for these network problems? I'm going to go home and cry, I'm just going to tell you. It's going to be a very, very sad evening. How are we on time? 7-8 minutes left. All right, so what we're going to do as a team here We're going back to this Beers app. We really are. We're going to find one that works. So let's pick this. You can see the one I did today. We're going to go to that one. Saw something on Twitter that says, you know, you're a developer if you'll scroll up through 700 commands and not retype something. And I thought, guilty. Okay, so that's going to refresh. Let's look at the code again. Once again, it takes about a minute. Here's the code. So where we were in the last part of the song was we had pulled in an API. We'd walked over the API and shoved the values inside of this object here, and then shoved the object inside an array. And I'm making that array available in a scope that I can then use for binding. And on the front side, all I've done is just make a slightly more complicated list item template. That was this part. You've seen all the other code before. I pasted all that in. But really what it is there's an image, which we're expecting to get from this object. There's a name we expect to get, and then there's a description we expect to get. Probably almost there. Yep, close. And then there's some CSS here. Who has a favorite color? Pink. That's pink. So that's T-Mobile pink. Anyone ever work at T-Mobile? FF0066. You need to know. Can never watch their commercials without saying that. Teal. Teal. Without the pound sign, and we should be rocking it. Likes it. Okay, so when this loads, we'll have an app. So some stuff that's coming in NativeScript in a week is Chrome Developer Tool support. So if you like debugging with that, we have that coming. We have enhanced Flexbox support. We support Angular 2. We will support Angular 4 when it comes out, or just Angular, whatever they want to call it today. We're doing a lot of great stuff. We take plenty of feedback from the community, and I think we've put together a very compelling package so that you can build whatever you like. Hey! How did my teal work? Let's try red. Slightly red. Purple is probably better. And that's that. Are there any questions I can answer? I'm happy to stay later, but if there's any questions, happy to talk through it.
What is the template library?
The question was, what is the template library? I don't know.
Is it just NativeScript?
Oh, yeah. So if you go to nativescript.org, there's plenty of information up there to get you started. Now, downloading NativeScript is just npm install NativeScript, and everything kind of happens for you. There's a little bit of a setup. If you haven't done mobile on your computer before, you'll need to install some emulators and get them going. Windows, we actually have an installer coming in 2 weeks, so if you try the manual process and it's a bit much, don't worry. We're going to help you. And I actually lied about the commercialization. If you're on Windows, you can't build an iOS app because apparently you have to have a Mac for that, but we do have some premium services that allow you to cloud build. And so if you're a Windows shop and still have to support iOS, there's some things we can do to help you there. Does that answer your question? Okay. If not, just hit me up after. I've got business cards. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I love NativeScript. It's my favorite thing in the world, so anything you need, let me know. Next question? Oh, yeah, and there's a panel. Yes, sir.
Minimum iOS and Android versions supported. And my second question is how to make the deployed application.
So question number one is, what's the minimum? The iOS one, I can make up any answer you want to know. I don't know. I really don't know. It's online, though. Android, we support as early as 4.2, so we cover like 98% of the market. In terms of the deploy size, like that's kind of up to you. Like base NativeScript is about 4 megs. That's all of our magic layers and runtimes and all that stuff. If you're lazy and you deploy to Android, you're going to get 10 megs, but that's because you're skipping some steps, right? So if size is an issue, and sometimes it is, especially outside of the U.S. There are ways to get it down to 4 megs of just NativeScript. From my experience, a good-looking mobile app has got megs and megs and megs of images, so we're just a tiny fraction, but there's no free lunch. In exchange for the magic, we take a few things like file size. You had a question?
Yeah, mine's actually kind of similar. I guess I was wondering what the code coverage is like in terms of the SDKs for Android and iOS. Are there things that you guys don't have access to, sensors-wise, or anything like that?
So, yeah, good question. The question is there anything we don't have access to? So this is the fundamental difference with NativeScript. You automatically have access to everything. Now, we provide stuff where there's cross-platform abstractions like button. Use our button, then you can have a button on iOS and a button on Android and never even worry about the API for button. But the iOS folks came out with some haptic sensor thing. Anybody know what that is? I don't even know what it is. I found out because I got a tweet saying, hey, you guys support the haptic sensor. We're like, what is that? I don't even know what it is. But because NativeScript lets you touch every native platform API from JavaScript, if it's in the native platform, you can just touch it. You can do it. You can use it. No problems. Like I said, I couldn't believe they could get away with it. Back in the bag.
So I'm guessing when you do things like that, then that's where you have your platforms folder where you can separate your UIs.
Yeah, so the question is, if you want to get native, what's the best architecture? I think that's a good rephrase. We do have a package architecture. It's kind of centralized around plugins, and a plugin is an easy way to put something in there. So if you're used to NPM, you're used to NPM packages, kind of follows that, except for it's more native-y with the iOS and Android parts. You can get access to whether something is running on iOS or Android and do something different or with a twist for that platform, or you can abstract it so that it's kind of commoditized, and depending on what you're deploying to, the specificity is hidden from the user of the code. So it's more of an architecture question. But if you're curious, if you dig through these node modules, you can learn a lot about how things work. We're about out of time. Okay, so last thing. Once again, cards, free, open source, truly native mobile. Appreciate you having me.